What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Market Talks here on Cointelegraph, the show where we are breaking down everything in the market that affects you as an investor. We bring on traders and influencers and experts in the space. I am today's host. My name is T.A. Tim, and I'm so excited to be joined by none other than Crypto Wendy O. She is just absolutely phenomenal. She's a YouTube media creator and crypto educator. Wendy became interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology back in November of 2017. That's a date. It seems like a lot of different YouTubers have gotten involved. She has been into crypto full-time since the summer of 2018 and focuses on providing transparent marketing and media solutions for blockchain companies globally. Wendy also provides free education via YouTube and Twitter to her growing audience of over 170,000 people. Oh, and she's also the largest female crypto influencer in the entire world.
Thank you so much for having me. That was the coolest intro ever. I absolutely loved it. And I'm excited to be here talking to you twice today. Yay.
Yes.
And of course,
no, I told people this morning on our show, Coffee and Crypto, I think Wendy and I literally exchanged names down in Miami at Bitcoin 2022. Yes. But other than that, we'd never got to talk, and I loved having her on our show this morning. And I can't wait to jump into this conversation. We got to have a little bit of it, but we're going to unwrap it even more here over the next 30 to 45 minutes or so. I think it's going to be really hard to go lower than 45 minutes, but we're going to do the best we can to respect everybody's time. But Wendy, let me just start. How are you doing today, especially with everything going on in the crypto market? Let's stay positive here. How are you feeling today?
I am absolutely great. And I also have to shout out to my daughter. She made me, it's hard for you guys to see, she made me the most beautiful necklace that is on baby Yoda back there. So I have to give a shout out to Lo, also known as Lagosta. But how is your day? What is going on with you? I would love to hear about it. What did you eat for breakfast?
Well, I don't eat breakfast, actually. I have not eaten breakfast. I say that. Every now and then, my wife and I, on Saturday mornings, will go to Chick-fil-A and get like Chick-fil-A chicken biscuits. But other than that, I just don't really eat breakfast. I've been that way since I was, I don't know, probably about 20. I'm 28 now, and I'm going strong for about 8 years now. Maybe I'll drink some coffee or an energy drink, but then I'll end up eating lunch or so. So I'll have to get into that after this show is over. But I'm feeling phenomenal. I'm feeling good. It's a big day for me. Hosted Coffee and Crypto this morning, hosting this show. Later on tonight, I'm doing a lot of other videos. Like, this is going to be my biggest day. So Lord, help my voice and help me to stay healthy. But I'm super excited to do this. But let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into some questions because, again, we could sit here and talk all day, just little chit chat, but we got a lot to jump into, not only on the charts, but in all the data that's going on. Wendy, I want to start off by just asking you, what is your overall view right now of the entire crypto space in general?
So we're not super deep in the bear market, but we are in a bear market. So I'm excited for the future. Like, the next couple of years is going to be pretty rough, especially because there's so much uncertainty. Are we getting regulation? Are we not getting regulation? Are we going to know how to pay our crypto taxes properly? Like, what is going on? Are we going to be able to do anything in the United States of America? We really don't know. So overall, it's kind of a rough period considering all of the crazy things that have happened in the last couple months. But long term, I'm very excited and I'm very bullish. And I'm most probably excited about the whole NFT aspect of crypto. So that's where I stand currently. Price action, I don't think is going to be too terribly great, but I'm optimistic for the future.
Yeah, you said NFT space is where you're most excited. What are you most excited about right now in that space?
So a lot of people just think NFTs are JPEG. I can right click it, whatever it is, but they don't understand that when you're given ownership that's provable, you can verify it. it's kind of revolutionary, especially when you're talking about people who are actual creators, when you're talking about artists, when you're talking about poets, writers, musicians, all of that jazz. And these people are
Hmm.
actually able to be given some sort of reprieve from the oppressive third party systems that we see. And I've got my eyes set very, very close on everything that's happening in the NFT market because I think that will help bring in the next bull run. And we're seeing a lot of traditional brands kind of partake in NFTs, Web3, and they want to
Yeah.
learn more about it. A lot of big brands, they've got kind of have that as a hedge. We're seeing new stories come out every day. And even though the market is in a bit of a slump, I think it's okay to take a step back and kind of watch what's happening instead of dumping money into all these random projects and see how it plays out. And then educate yourself for when we do start to get very bullish again in the next few years.
That's something that even changed my mind. I didn't start off as the biggest NFT guy, but the more and more I've done my research into it and what the future looks like, I think there's going to be a point where if you want to be a business on planet Earth, you will need to be involved in the NFT space in one form or another. But we're going to transition topics here. Unless someone was born yesterday, they know that the CPI data just came out with a whopping 9.1% increase to US dollar inflation. It's absolutely crazy. Wendy, my first question about this whole thing, do you think that that 9.1 is a legitimate number, or do you think that they're not telling us something?
Of course, it's not a legitimate number. Inflation is so much higher. And also, it's not like the reports that our public servants push out and the reports that these people that think that they're better than all of us push out, they're not super accurate. They tell a small piece of the story, but they're not telling the entire story. And they are very careful on what numbers they use, which I always find it interesting. So when I hear information coming out like this, I take a step back, I digest that information, and then I start looking at other sources and I start asking questions and I talk to people, especially within my network, or I talk to people that are older and smarter than I am. One of my favorite things ever is when I go to like a dive bar or when I go somewhere is finding the oldest person in the room and listening to what they have to say, listening to them and have them tell their stories because you're going to learn a lot more. And just because it's not some fancy suit that's telling you or some fancy media outlet, you're going to be able to learn a lot. And that information is going to be immensely valuable, especially when you're hearing about stories from people that, went through the financial crash of 2008, that lived through the 80s, that were purchasing homes during that time, especially when we had very, very high interest rates. I think that the rates were close to 16, 15% to purchase a home. So I take into account those other things and then I make my own decisions at the data presented. And we had a chart. Can I pull that image up? Let me see if I can find that image
That
over here.
works.
But we actually talked about it on, well, it's a bunch of different images, and I've got a point to this. So we talked about this on CoinDesk the other day, and the importance of this is I know it's kind of hard to see, guys. Consumer inflation, official versus shadow stats, and this is from the 1990 base, and the official CPI dash U is going to be the red numbers over here, but the actual the way that they used to calculate it back in the 90s, if they were to calculate today's current market the way that they calculated it back in the 90s, you're going to see the rates actually be a lot higher. And I've got a couple
Wow.
questions to that. Why are they calculating it differently? Why are they not utilizing those old numbers? Why are they changing the way that they take into account various aspects when life is kind of completely different than it was in 1990 than it was today? So that's why I have a hard time and really believing what is being put out there, because you can literally walk into a store and you can see what's going on. If you just go into your local communities, you'll be able to get a better perspective of the current market than looking at some of these reports. However, some of these reports are immensely important, especially for those that are trading traditional markets. It's important to get information from different sources. And especially if you have to trade these particular markets, you're going to need these types of reports to come out. But at the end of the day, they're really doing a big service to the American population long term because they're not really accurate, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and for anyone who either maybe didn't see it on the screen or is listening to this and not watching, that blue line that you showed, if am I wrong in saying that looks like it's sitting somewhere close to around 17%, 18%, not the 9.1 that is being reported from the government?
I mean, of course, they're going to fudge the numbers. Why would they want to really push fear into Americans? And
That's
one of
true.
the things that, like, because well, I grew up in my great aunt and my grandma, they helped my mom raise my sisters and I, and both my great aunt and my grandma, they lived through the Great Depression. They came to America with their families, I believe. I want to say my family came over between 1910 to 1930. But my grandma and my great aunt, they lived through the Great Depression as kids, and they told me
Wow.
how they used to live, like what how they survived, how their dad would get the coupons for food, and because he was working on the railroads to build America, he would give those coupons to other family members so that they can afford to eat. Because back then things were
Mm,
so bad during the Depression, you literally had to wait in a food line to eat. And this was back in New York, Mulberry Street, Little Italy. So I think about stories like that. And I think about what America would look like today if we really went into a big depression like that. I mean, can you fathom it? I can't fathom it.
no, it's something that I think people have to at least start putting in the back of their mind to prepare for. But I am very much hoping, Lord willing, that does not happen again. But I'm only 28, so of course I didn't even get to live through what happened back in the 80s. Even if I had, like my sister was older at that time, or she was a baby at that time. But I'm doing my history. I'm studying what happened in those early, like you said, your family came in around 1910. The financial crisis that led to that depression was beginning right there in that region around 1907. And I'm just doing my history and learning all about what played into a couple recessions that led into a depression. And you can't help but wonder and look at what we're currently doing and say, oh my gosh, we are making the exact same mistakes that we made about 100 years ago and acting like we are completely different.
If not worse, to be honest. I
Yeah.
mean, the way that government spending is happening in the United States, and this is the reason why I'm just talking about United States is because I'm born and raised here, and I don't really want to comment on other outside countries' policies too terribly much because I'm not there and I'm not actively studying
Right.
it. I'm really focusing on what's happening in the United States is because I'm here. I have a family here. My first job is being a mom and taking care of my daughter, making sure she's healthy and safe and she has everything she needs. So I want to, I'm paying attention to these reports. I'm paying attention to what I'm seeing in the stores, but it's we're in a very interesting place in time, very very interesting place,
Mm,
and we can only hope for the best and do things to prepare ourselves the best for all of these
yeah.
numbers that are coming out.
Yeah, well, as these numbers are coming out, Wendy, let's kind of transition this into what will this have impact on the rest of the space? And let's start with Bitcoin. What are your expectations on what these numbers mean for the future price action of Bitcoin?
I'm going to stick to my guns here, and I don't think that this is the bottom yet. I think it's a potential
Mm,
local bottom. We have a lot of support that's gathered in the $20,000 area, and we're seeing a lot of headlines, especially like mainstream crypto media. We're seeing a lot of headlines coming out and stating, "Oh, this is the bottom, like the worst is over." Unfortunately, I don't think the worst is over. I really don't. We're literally in a consolidation range between approximately 22.6 and 17.6, and I do like to take into account these swing wick lows that occur. And if we zoom in on the week, or excuse me, if we look at the weekly, we can kind of see this a little bit better. And you could even tighten the range up a little bit more to approximately $19,000 and $20,000. Yes, that we've had a really, really gnarly downtrend, but I don't think that this is the end of it. And
mm,
we are currently teetering on support here. There's a little bit of support that happens, but if you look down to like the $12,000 area, it seems like a nicer bottom. And there's other areas that I'm also paying attention to. So I am still calling for like absolute capitulation at about $10,000. I'm not saying it's going to happen today. I'm not saying it's going to happen this week. This is something that I'm looking for long term because again, we do have Bitcoin happening that is coming up. I believe, I know it's a rolling date, but it's expected to occur in 2024. So we have a lot more time for price action. I also do think that we could potentially have some sort of melt up, but I don't think that the dust has really settled too terribly much in the crypto markets. There's a lot of things that can happen in a day. Crypto moves super, super fast. And and one of the things that I do to actively, protect myself and as an investor or trader is I come up with a bullish scenario and I come up with a bearish scenario, and I'm interested in knowing how much I stand to lose or stand to gain, how long my trade's going to be, how long this particular investment is going to be. So I don't like to rule things out, and I don't necessarily trade or invest with absolutes, but I do feel pretty confident that
mm.
I don't think that this is the bottom. It could be the local bottom. We could have a beautiful melt up at the end of July, which fingers crossed, that's what I'm hoping for. But after we have that, what's going to happen next? Like, where's money going to come from? We have so many negative headlines regarding crypto and mainstream media that it's going to take a little bit of take a little bit of time for things to get kind of settled. Plus, we also have impending regulation coming with the FCC or the CFTC, and then Biden's executive order to establish the crypto work group, plus a potential integration of a CBDC, which they keep changing on exactly how that they want to execute it. But when you take all of those things to account, the United States is behind tremendously compared to other countries. And it's kind of like a waiting game. And on top of it, I had attorney John Deaton on my show, and he was saying that, and I believe it was him that was saying that, but he was basically saying we're probably not going to see any type of regulation occur when we're so close to election season. And we have two other very, very hot topics coming into play that are very special and very, very, they're very controversial to a lot of people.
Completely agree with you, and I'm going to share my screen here and even kind of even further back up what Wendy was talking about right there on the charts with Bitcoin. Those of you who have watched me do this on my show over Coffee and Crypto Live, I'm going to go out to I'll go out to the daily chart and show you guys what I've been seeing on Coinbase. I made a chart here where I showed the different times that these numbers have come into effect, the CPI and the FOMC meetings. So all the blue arrows is when we got reports from inflation. So you guys can see those numbers reflect inflation percentages. The green arrows are the responses for the FOMC. And I completely agree with Wendy that I don't think that the bottom is in yet. And one of the reasons why is because, as you guys are going to watch here, when these numbers were a little lower, almost every single inflation number is kind of correlated with, at best, a sideways movement. It's the FOMC meetings that potentially sometimes bring bullish action. But of course, 7% inflation, that's high. We ended up dipping down here to begin the year off. A lot of you guys remember that. But the Fed didn't want to do anything. So guess what? All right, well, we have inflation. The dollar's getting less valuable day in and day out. The Fed doesn't want to fix it. Let's invest in Bitcoin. Well, inflation just got worse because we didn't fix anything. So the price comes back down, kind of plays a little bit. And then inflation gets even worse. We have two CPI numbers come out, 7.9. We move sideways weight because we know a couple days later that the Fed's going to meet. They only come out with 25 basis points and we rally. It wasn't until over here in May when the Fed kind of started saying, we got a problem. The price started dipping on almost every single report on the daily chart. Now, what we're going through right now, if we're going to go all the way down to the 4-hourly chart, a lot of people are looking at what we see happen right now. Let's arrow right here. This red candle right here was the 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time window for anyone who was watching. This is when the report came out. Big red candle. But we've kind of been moving up. We've been moving up. And I think a lot of people are sitting here saying, hey, is Bitcoin going to rally? Is this news of the 9.1 really not as significant as we thought? Here's the problem. And there is some volume coming in. I made a video earlier today talking about that volume was just really low. If you go to another chart, the volume is, there's a wick where there's some decent little volume there, but there's just not a whole heck of a lot of volume, meaning traders aren't necessarily even convinced just yet. And let me take you back over to this chart, go out to the 4-hourly chart to look at these areas a little bit, from a bigger standpoint. Let's go back to this one right here when the Fed came out with 75. At first, when they came out with 75 basis point hike, we actually had a couple green candles. We rallied up before a couple days later, then we fell, right? So scrolling even farther back, this is the only time when we had an 8.6 CPI number. Of course, that was talking about the historic levels of it. That's the only time that I see us just go ahead and dip down. There were three green candles right there on the 4-hourly chart before we continued, but it's not significant. It's the other ones. Look at right here, 8.3, we dipped and then rallied and actually started to slowly move to the upside before that 8.6 came in. These levels right here, we had a 50 basis point height rake. We actually kind of moved sideways. We actually moved up a little bit and then dipped. So when I'm seeing this happen right here, I'm trying to wrap this in a long story short. Just because we have not had the bottom just fall out from under us does not mean that this 9.1 level is not going to be significant. Even as Wendy was kind of pointing out there, they're not even telling us the full story. And while they're trying to present these numbers to make themselves look good and make things look not as bad as they really actually are to gain votes from this election coming up here in a couple of months, in all reality, you as the average retail investor are going to feel the weight of this inflation. And I still see, there's a chance, I'm not going to call it zero. There's a chance we can continue to move to the upside. But 2 weeks from now, when we get the FOMC coming back out, I think that's really what we're going to see. Kind of similar to what we had happen over here. Let's see where we had right here. I think we're going to see something similar to right here. We had 8.5 reported back in April. We kind of moved sideways. We did rally. We came back down. We really just moved down and to the right and, sideways. Then we had the FOMC come out at a higher level. A lot of people thought they were going to stay at 25 basis points. They ended up getting a little bit more aggressive with 50. And just to put that in perspective, why I think something could happen similarly, this number is ridiculously high. We were not ready for it. We thought it was going to be 8.8 at the worst. It's actually even worse than 9.1. And at the moment, the tide has kind of changed to where a couple of days ago, if you were going to go look, let me see if I had the right tool here. I believe this is it. Yes. So this is a CME futures tool that kind of helps predict what they think the next rate's going to be. So put this perspective right now, we are sitting at 1.75, right? That is what our current interest rates are. This is kind of predicting what the next level is going to be. So you guys see this 250 to 275. What that's signifying is a 75 basis point hike. 2.25 is signifying a 50 basis point hike. A couple of days ago, this number right here that is now 37 was sitting at 92, I believe, 92%, with only 7 point, whatever it was, the difference, believing that it was going to be a 75 basis point hike. Ever since those numbers come out, it is shifting every single day, and we still have 2 weeks. I'm going to watch these numbers continue to shift and shift and shift to where what's going to happen is, while a lot of people thought 50 basis points was going to be the next interest rate hike, it's going to end up being 75 again. It's going to end up hurting people more than they thought. And I do think the price, if it doesn't begin to fall before this date, I think after that announcement, we will see a fall again. And I think, Wendy, last thing I'm going to point out here on the charts, Wendy, you talked about that $12,000 level. Well, that's the support you're looking at way back, when you go and scroll back out in the history of their support there. Guess what else is saying 12,000, or at least close to that level, is this little bear flag we have forming right now. If I were to extrapolate this over from this peak, that level right there is sitting at 12,700, 12,600, depending on how you draw it. Those levels are very, very, very much well within the cards of what we could be seeing on Bitcoin here within not only, we're not even just talking about the next couple of months. We could potentially even see this happen within the next couple of weeks. So with that being said, Wendy, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I want to hear what you have to say about that. What are your thoughts about all that happening on the chart? Do you think that is something that we are looking at in the next couple of weeks, or do you think we will see that rally first before maybe putting that dip off for a couple of months?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I have no idea. I don't know if it's going to be the next couple months. No, and I'm being honest. And the reason why I'm being honest, the reason why I'm not so, generally I'm a lot more confident. The reason why is that we've seen so much happen in the crypto industry, and like literally since end of May, we've seen so much happen. And we're also seeing a lot of global news come out. We're seeing inflation in other places. We're seeing all of these political leaders. I'm trying to think of the proper way to say this without messing up with the algo. But we've seen resignations of political leaders. We've seen people call for removal of other political leaders. And this is on a global scale. There's a lot of different strife and stress happening in other countries that we need to kind of take into consideration. If something like that pops off, the market is going to react instantly. And we don't know if something like that is going to happen. We're also in a very interesting time when it comes to goods and services and how those are being valued, especially in the United States. So I'm looking at all of these different aspects, and let's face it, crypto and Bitcoin are still speculative assets. I love Bitcoin. I think it's absolutely fantastic, but at the same time, it's a speculative asset and it's a very young asset. So for us to say this is going to happen, and I'm confident this is going to happen, especially the type of market we're in, and especially looking at the inflation numbers, what people are bringing home, we're in a recession, are we going to enter a depression? If people don't have disposable income, there's not going to be a lot of money floating into Bitcoin and crypto. We saw a lot of money floating into Bitcoin and crypto because everybody was kind of bored in the house. They were stuck home. And that was a very notable thing to pay attention to. Then we saw all this wild speculation with NFTs, with altcoins, with DeFi and whatnot, which I think was a very interesting time as well. But we're seeing a lot of money, and we're seeing a lot of trust leave the market. So there's going to be a time period for the bear and whatnot, but I think it's too early to tell if we're going to see that $10,000 dip, or excuse me, that price drop to about $10,000 or $12,000 in the next couple of weeks or so. I personally like to analyze the market week by week and focus on what's happening there, and then make an assumption based off of the findings that I have realized.
Wendy, I'm so glad you said that. And that is such a good answer, that more people need to be answering it that way. There's so many creators and I love them. There's so many great ones out there, but we are so desperate to try to predict every little detail for the next 3 years of what's happening. And it's like, no, we need to just focus on what's going to happen over here the next 5 minutes before we try to stretch our brains to the exact amount of what Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever is going to happen within the next 5 years. There's such a big window that's going to happen. So thank you for that absolute honesty of, hey, I'm not going to even attempt to try to make a perfect prediction. I'm focusing on the here and now and the next couple candles we see pop up. But let's transition over.
One quick second is, like, if we come out, like, because the SEC can come out with regulation like any day if they wanted to, and they can take an emergency
Exactly.
action and do that. There's a particular term, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if that happens, that's gonna completely shock the market. So you can have a really bullish trajectory that's going to occur that you think is gonna happen in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. But if you're in the United States and the SEC comes out with a very, very aggressive type of regulation that's kinda out of the blue, out of nowhere, that's gonna impact the markets and your analysis could be wrong. My analysis could be wrong. And even though the United States is still a small piece of the puzzle in the whole entire crypto ecosystem because we're a global, we operate on a global scale, that is still gonna have global impacts and ramifications because it could kind of shock or freak people out a little bit, especially those that might not be in this country. So I just like to throw those pieces of information out there when I'm talking about long-term predictions. Right now, I'm not feeling super confident about us absolutely mooning or us absolutely dumping anytime soon. I am hoping for some sort of melt up or really nice reprieve at the end of July. But again, I could be 100% wrong there because of all of these factors that we just discussed.
Hmm. Good. That's a great point there, Wendy. Let's transition, and we're talking about Bitcoin now. Let's transition into Ethereum. Do you have any different thoughts about Ethereum, or do you think Ethereum right now is kind of glued to the hip of Bitcoin? Because when you look at the charts, there are some small, minute differences, but as a whole, some people might look at the two charts, and if they don't look at that top left corner and see Ethereum over the US dollar or Bitcoin to US dollar, they could be, trapped in thinking they're almost the exact same chart.
I mean, we do see some similarities. I'm pulling it up right now, and I actually haven't paid too much attention to the Ethereum chart. There was a while when I would trade Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin all together because they were moving very, very similar during the last cycle. But as far as Ethereum goes, it's got a completely different use case and it's got a lot of different utility. So comparing the two, I think it's not doing anybody a good service because we have Ethereum that you can build on top of. We've got smart contracts. It's got this whole entire ecosystem. There's multiple different altcoin projects that are reliant on Ethereum sustaining. In addition, we have Ethereum that's planning on merging over from proof of work to proof of stake. So that's going to kind of change a little bit of the fundamentals of Ethereum. And we have different, when it comes to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is really like a store of value. It's a hedge. It's a hedge against inflation. It's something that you want to use as digital cash. So there's different use cases for Bitcoin as opposed to Ethereum. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I think that those differences are important to take into account when you're talking about investing. I think both projects will be around for quite some time, but they do different things. And it is important to note that Ethereum was not created to be a hedge against the US dollar. It wasn't created to become some sort of digital cash. It was kind of created for utility, to be utilized, for people to build on top of it, for people to create really, really cool things. And I also do want to add is that with Ethereum, and with altcoins, I do think that they do play a very important role to Bitcoin's development. And I do not think Bitcoin would be where it's at today without Ethereum, without some of these other altcoins, because it breeds for positive competition.
I agree. I mean, at this point, do you think you're starting to compare? I love how even you went there. It's like a lot of people just want to compare Bitcoin and Ethereum right next to each other as if they're the exact same product and they're going to produce the exact same thing. They're very, very different. But if you had to give an edge to one of them, which do you think is? It's a weird question because there's really no such thing as a good bear market. But which one of them do you think is faring a little bit better throughout this whole process?
So as far as I don't this is the thing. Altcoins still are very heavily correlated to Bitcoin. So when we get Bitcoin that dumps, generally it's going to have a negative impact on altcoins. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we're not mature enough as a market to kind of do the decoupling yet. We're seeing it, we are seeing some signs, but it's not there yet to where we can really pay attention to that. As far as faring in the bear market, it really kind of depends on your personal interest and your goals and your dreams, what you plan to do as an investor. Do you want to hold this long term? How much money do you want to put into it? What do you expect to get back? And a lot of this also is contingent on Ethereum merging over to proof of stake. So we have a lot of different factors, a lot of different things happening. One of the things I am excited about with Bitcoin is Taproot and seeing how all that will kind of play out. But realistically, I think it's important to have a diversified portfolio and to not just put all your eggs in one basket. But again, that's just my personal opinion.
I 100% agree. Now, one thing that we can see no matter what coin you're really looking, I guess there's probably a couple very, very small altcoins that don't seem to be going down right now. They're going up. But as a whole, the whole crypto market has been very much in a state of fear. Just looking at fear and greed index, you're seeing a very, very low, historically low even. there's been like almost this contagion of fear in the market. How long do you think the contagion in the crypto space is going to last? Because I know you as an influencer, as you know, you're on YouTube, you're on TikTok, you're on Twitter, you're on the views, the people coming in and watching and subscribing, and they're going down. People are just very afraid of crypto right now. How long do you think we're going to see that continue in this space? Because honestly, this is the best time for people. If people knew it was good for them, this is the best time to get into crypto. And yet it's the time when everyone seems to be running from it.
So, one of the things that we do need to take into account is, and I'm just going to be talking about Americans here. In America, we are not taught personal finance in public school, which is kind of the bare minimum as to what they should be teaching us. That's a story for another time. So, a lot of people aren't
Yeah.
really great investors and they're not well versed in it. And is it really their fault? Kind of, sort of. Can you use the argument, well, God helps those who help themselves. You need to go out and self educate? You could. But at the same time, if we're kind of conditioned to think a certain way, then that's the way, the masses are going to think. So I think that, we are definitely seeing a decrease in views, and it's typical bear market stuff, but I'm not going to stop making content. I want to have my content out there for the people that are interested. I will say that my educational videos, especially on TikTok, especially about self-custody, how to research projects, like different things like that, how to take profit, those are getting a lot less views than they were before. But at the same time, there is still an interest. People are still paying attention. And I think that we will. And one other thing that forgot to add that I want to add, there's a lot of rivalry in crypto still. Like there's an NFT community and there's a crypto community. So I've seen content creators that are just specifically making NFT content. And I'm seeing crypto content creators that are just making crypto content. And that's important to know, because realistically, when you think about crypto and blockchain and all of this, to me, it's like one big group. But the way that the mass media or the way that mainstream views this is they don't view it all that way. So again, I do think that NFTs are going to be what it is to kind of bring the masses in and kind of ignite the next bull run. We kind of saw it already happen back of summer of 2021. But I think that once things start to get a little bit more stable and people see projects that are actually able to sustain, because let's face it, we don't know if somebody else is going to file for bankruptcy. We don't know who's going to go under next. So I feel like it's kind of like a very, very sensitive time for most investors and for most people, which is fair. And I think it's okay to take a step back and maybe take a little bit of a break. And instead of just tossing money into a market, we're focused on self-education and to become a better trader or investor.
Man, that's a great answer, Wendy. I got one more question before we actually jump in and let some of the chat ask some questions. But I know one of the things that's really important to you and that you're really, really good at helping people understand is how to secure their crypto. So my last question for you, how can people safeguard their crypto assets? Is there any advice that you have specifically that they need to be taking advantage of today?
So the most important thing before you're ready to use cold storage or custody your own crypto is to understand how this stuff works and understand the risk, because we have a lot of people that just say, you have to get a ledger, you have to get a paper wallet, you have to get a Trezor, you have to do all these things. But realistically, there's a big process behind it. You have to know how to secure your keys. You have to know how to practice good OPSEC. You need to know how exactly this works. And I think that a lot of people just jump to, okay, I'm going to get a ledger, I'm going to throw my stuff on it, everything is great. But then they forget about the small little pieces. Like, am I sending it to the right crypto address? Am I sending a test amount? Am I storing my private keys online? Am I making sure that my cold storage device actually works? One of the most important tips I can tell you guys is when you're setting up a brand new device like a Ledger or Trezor, before you send any crypto to that device, make sure you reset the device so that your private keys or whatever it is that you've written down, and that you're able to use what you've written down and secured, and it actually can reset that device properly. Because if you do not have your keys and you send crypto to that device, or you write a wrong word or a wrong letter down or whatever it is, you're going to lose your crypto. So the most important aspect is understanding how this works and also understanding the risk. And I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but some people do better by leaving their stuff on exchanges, which we have found out that that's not probably a great idea. And so a lot of people thought, okay, exchanges are safe, I'm going to leave it there. And they didn't pay attention. They didn't try to focus on learning about cold storage and custodying their own keys. So that is very important. And there's a lot of different ways you can do so. You can use a ledger, you can use a Trezor. Paper wallets are really, really great and probably better for Bitcoin, but you have to understand how to use those. And you also have to take responsibility that if you wash your paper wallet in the washing machine, you don't have an extra copy, or you lose your private seed phrase, you're kind of screwed. So it's important to pay attention to that aspect. If you're somebody who's like, hey, I don't have any money, what do? I can't afford a ledger or Trezor. Well, one of the things that you can do is you can go to a platform like CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap. I believe they have a little tab on the side, and it'll tell you what wallets do support that particular cryptocurrency that you want to self custody. And they've got desktop wallets. Sometimes they recommend different types of mobile wallets. I know a really popular one is Trust Wallet. A really great way to utilize that is have a second device. You got to have multiple devices here, or throw away one. Get a second device, maybe an old iPhone or an old Android, and utilize Trust Wallet or whatever app it is. Make sure you've done your research and make sure you understand the vulnerabilities there before putting your crypto there, but have it on a separate device and keep it offline. That's a really great trick that people can use. But just make sure you're practicing good OPSEC. Make sure it's not your primary cell phone, because if you happen to click on a link or open a weird email, you can get your crypto stolen if it's not secured properly. And please, please, please do not keep your private seed phrase or those special words or numbers or whatever it is on a electronic device. Please keep those safely. I know CryptoTag is a great product. It's got the titanium card that you can go ahead and etch your private seed phrase or your keys in properly.
Another one, Wendy, I don't know if you've given anyone advice on this one, but I was discussing this with a good friend of mine. And then when we were at Consensus out in Texas here a couple months ago, we got to sit in an interview with Charles Hoskinson where he was even talking about this. You'd mentioned some people need to leave their money on exchanges because they don't know how to use seed phrases. They don't really know how to use cold wallets and make sure they're safe. What's even bigger is what if you understand perfectly how to use your seed phrase and how to use your cold wallet, but God forbid something happens to you and you're leaving that money to family members who have no idea what they're doing in crypto? What about for people who are sitting in that situation?
I'm going to recommend that you contact an attorney. You contact somebody that can manage a trust for you, and you have all of that legally documented. I know that for some people, especially in America, talking about death and planning about death is a very taboo topic. We don't like to do it. But realistically, if you've got a substantial amount or any amount or anything that you do want to leave to a loved one, I think it is important to create a trust and have some sort of information there for the people that you love. Or if you don't have anybody that you love, like where you want to donate it, what happens. But again, you're probably going to have to, depending on where you live too, because I know different states have different jurisdictions and different types of laws and regulations regarding this, but talk to an expert. And it might actually, and one of the things that is very taboo is people don't like to pay for attorneys. Having an attorney that you can call and ask these really tough questions to is actually going to save you in the long run. Because let's say you have to pay $300 for the consultation, but you get the answer that you need, and then you're able to successfully store your crypto or, have things set up. It's going to make life a lot easier instead of you actually losing that crypto or something happening down the line and, somebody getting screwed out of getting that crypto.
Okay, great advice there, Wendy. We're going to transition to some chat and get you guys questions for Wendy. While I'm doing that, make sure there's 62 of you right now. Make sure you smash that like button. We can definitely get that number higher, especially if those of you who have loved everything Wendy's had to bring to the table, hit that like button. On the topic of self-custody, we do have a chat from Nathan Alvarado saying, on the self-custody topic, what about the newer wallets offered by Coinbase or blockchain, for example, that are not on an exchange?
So I don't use any of those, so I can't comment on that. I would just be a little bit weary. And I'm going to share a horror story that I had. There was a wallet that it was a crypto wallet, and they were supposed to be open source and whatnot, and it was a mobile wallet, and I had some altcoins there because I was actively swing trading that and moving my moon bag ones over there. Well, guess what, a couple of years went by. I was like, okay, I want to see if this thing is worth anything now. So I went to try to log in and get my crypto off of it, and that wallet had gone down. My private seed phrase didn't work at all, so I wasn't even able to get into it. So I'd just be a little bit cautious with some of those with some of those. I'm not saying that they're bad. I would just understand exactly how they work and understand the pros and the cons and see if that makes sense to you.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We have another one from Everett Verplunk. He said, is DCAing into Bitcoin the way to go, or is there bearish market, is in this bearish market, sorry, reading that wrong, cash is not trash for now and just view the PA on the charts? I think it said TA, so I'm got to make a couple edits there. But is DCAing in Bitcoin your advice for right now, Wendy?
Thank you for the question, Everett. Personally, I am not a big dollar cost average person. I think it's good for some people, but for me personally, because I'm looking at actively swing trading some of this stuff, I personally like to set limit orders. And the reason why I want to set limit orders is because I want to dictate to the market where I'm buying. And when you're dollar cost
Mm.
averaging, you're basically, it's kind of like a crock pot. You set it and forget it. So, well, no, that's actually like limit orders. Sorry, I'm getting really hungry. I haven't had my breakfast yet. Um, but when you're setting, because when you're dollar cost averaging, and both methods are fine, this is the thing, you do what works for you. You do what works for you and your family and your budget and your hopes and your dreams. Like, you do what makes you feel comfortable after you've done the critical thinking and you've done the education. So with limit orders, you're actually able to dictate to the market where you're buying. Is it guaranteed that those limit orders will get hit? No. Is that okay? 100%. It's okay to, it's okay to practice risk management that way. Some people like to dollar cost average, and that's fine too. But understand, when you're dollar cost averaging, you're setting that particular date and time where you're buying X amount of asset at X amount of at whatever the market value is. So it's a good strategy, but it might not be for everybody. For me, it doesn't necessarily work
Mm.
with Bitcoin because of what I'm trying to do. But for somebody else that's brand new, that's not necessarily a trader, I think it's a fantastic idea, just as long as you understand the pros and the cons of it. But I wouldn't, the only thing I would say is with altcoins, I'd be very, very careful dollar cost averaging. Very, very, very careful. Because again, I don't think Bitcoin has bottomed out, and I don't think altcoins have bottomed out yet. And that is my
Right.
opinion, not financial advice.
Right. Well, this one that's not necessarily a question, but I do think it's important to bring up. Rich New Design said, "I know of dozens of small retail crypto investors that have had to cash in to simply make bills. It's a scary time." And transitioning that, Wendy, I don't know if you heard, but there's obviously been some of these stories where miners are having to they're having to take profit at these low levels, and again, they're not taking profit; they're taking a loss,
Mhm.
but they're having to cash out just to pay their bills. You never like to see that, because I know those who do on-chain metrics, they love watching when miner wallets start to make moves. They love when they see a miner start to take, transition their money into cash. That's a sign usually the price is about to go low. We're at a top or something. But in this case, it's not indicating a top. It's indicating the price is going to go down even lower, as low as we are, because they're struggling to pay their bills. What are your thoughts about that? Are you seeing the exact same thing? I know we talked about that a little bit this morning. Out there in California, out there in LA, it can get pretty rough.
Yeah, so I do remember back, and I want to say it was 2018 or 2019, when the miners actually capitulated. I was sitting at an OTC desk run by my friends, and he was like, "There's no way Bitcoin goes below $7,500," or it was something like that. He's like, "If it does," because most of his clients were miners, and he's like, "If Bitcoin does drop below this level, that means things are going to get really bad. They're going to completely capitulate. Places are going to shut down." And in fact, we did, because that was like their profit margin. So I think it's important to note that people do have to pay bills, and especially a lot of these big mining firms, they have to pay bills. They're going to have to liquidate some of their holdings. And I think a lot of people didn't necessarily think that we were going to have all this crypto contagion occur. So we didn't really plan for these low levels yet. We knew that this was a possibility, but we didn't know that it was going to happen this fast. Because I want to say we had 10 or 11 Bitcoin red weekly candles, which had never happened before in history. But some people do have to take profit. They do have to take profit. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it ended up working out that way. But it's going to be something that we're going to be seeing a lot more. And there was also there was a big push of collateralized Bitcoin loans, to where you put your Bitcoin up, and so you don't have to pay taxes. But what a lot of people didn't realize with those is, if and when your loan did get liquidated, you do have to pay taxes on that tax triggering event, because the firm or whatnot has to actually sell the Bitcoin to pay for the liquidation. So that's another interesting thing that we may be hearing a lot about soon, due to the volatility with Bitcoin.
Wow. Well, the last question I'm going to ask you, Wendy, and this is from me. I've seen a couple comments about the bottoms and about the future of Bitcoin. A lot of people are scared, and we definitely understand why. But I'm going to ask you to make a long-term prediction here, Wendy. 5 years from now, will the Bitcoin price be above or below $20,000?
In 5 years from now, I think it'll be above $20,000. I think, I want to say, because the the mining halvening, the Bitcoin halvening is going to be like 2024. That's when it's estimated. But
Yeah.
again, it's a moving date depending on the miner's productivity and all that type of stuff. Seth, mind your biz. You guys make sure you subscribe to his channel. Super, super outstanding, smart guy. Knows really, really well versed in all of mining. And I always ask him, like, "Hey, I have this dumb question for you." But I think that we will be above $20,000. Hopefully, we'll be above $20,000, and hopefully, we'll be seeing those new all-time highs occur. And hopefully, we
Yeah.
can kiss that $100,000 Bitcoin range.
Yeah. Well, in this bear market, we've seen a lot of trends break, but one trend that has not broke is anyone who invested 5 years ago, they have not been put in loss at all. And I'm not expecting that
Yet.
trend to break anytime soon. With that being said, Wendy, thank you so much. It was such an honor to get to talk with you today on 2 different channels. But make sure all of you out there, you go follow Wendy O on all of her platforms. Wendy, real quick, you're on YouTube, you're on Twitter, you're on TikTok. What else are you on?
So I am on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, mostly Twitter. I just post a lot of fun stuff, nothing too serious. But it's just because that's the type of audience that's there. But YouTube and TikTok is where you'll get some of my real alpha if you choose to listen. So
Wow.
there's that. And my newsletter too. You guys, please make sure to subscribe to the
Yes.
newsletter. It is 100% free and it's really, really, really effing good. The guys that we have writing for us, absolutely amazing. These guys are some of the smartest people in the space and you will learn a lot about fundamentals.
Damn. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. You guys can follow me as well on Twitter. You guys are going to see at Tims_TA. If you want to watch more of me on YouTube, I am over on Crypto Jeb. I'm one of the hosts over there. With that being said, though, guys, that is all we have for you in this video. Make sure to tune in again next week with more market talks here on Cointelegraph. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.